You are listening to the Archaeology Podcast Network.
Hello and welcome to the CRM Archaeology Podcast, episode 85 for May 25th, 2016. I'm your host, Chris Webster. On today's show, we talk about the new job board at PCS, professional communication standards for applying for jobs, and the new overtime laws signed by the Obama administration last week. 2017 is going to be an interesting year for CRM Archaeology. So check your annual salary and watch out for your next raise because the CRM Archaeology Podcast starts right now. Welcome to the show, everyone. Joining me today is Bill in Arizona.
Good morning.
And Doug in Scotland.
Hey, guys.
Doug, how's it going? Bill? All right. So, first off, Bill, are we ready to have the heat safety conversation yet? Because Tucson?
Well, I don't know. It's absolutely amazing right now, but I'm keeping my fingers crossed because it's like 85 degrees, beautiful, sunny. I mean, some people would say we're crazy, but I think it's too cold to go swimming.
Yeah.
Keep telling the kids no, it's too cold to go out there. It's only 89. It's too cold. It's too cold.
It's only 89. Well, and that's a huge concern for late May, early June in CRM is because if you're looking for jobs all across the country, you really got to know what to bring for clothing because in Reno. Yesterday in Reno, we had snow in East Reno, near the mountains, near the base of the mountains. Those people over in the foothills, they had snow.
Christ.
I-80 was closed over Donner Pass, and because of snow. Yeah, yesterday. And however, there's a guy I know on Facebook, and he posted a picture from Death Valley 2 days ago, and it was 109 degrees. That's 3 hours south of here. So, it's maybe 4 hours south of here. But anyway. And it's Death Valley, lowest point in the continental United States. So it's going to be hot. But and according to Doug in the background here, says that's 32°C for our international listeners, which is quite high. But anyway, that's one of the things we're going to talk about here in the first segment is, we're going to talk about job postings and we're going to talk about a little bit of etiquette in looking for jobs in relation to email and stuff like that, because email is not the only form of communication these days, and you don't want to screw up that first interaction by doing something that might be perceived as inappropriate by somebody, because you really don't know the age and social demographic of somebody that you're emailing for a job. So, but before we get into that, I want to give a quick PCS update. Our last episode was about PCS, the new company that I'm a part of. So, full disclosure there. Professional certifications for scientists. And if I could talk about PCS on somebody else's podcast, I would, but I don't know anybody else that has a podcast to talk about it on. So we're going to talk about it here real quick. We've had one, and I think we've got a couple more in the pipeline, but we've had one job posting posted to our PCS job board, and it looks really good. The job itself, it's good for locals. There's no per diem and no lodging because they're looking for local people because they're trying to staff up their office, I think. So from a pure money-making standpoint, the job doesn't look totally awesome for a shovel bum, but it looks awesome for somebody who lives in the LA area. So there's that. But anyway, it's coming along, and I think I have to admit too that, and I want your guys' thoughts on why this might be as well. In the especially in the last 6 months to a year, I've noticed, especially on the Facebook group for Archaeo Field Techs, that there's been so much discussion about how much people hate job postings right now and how shitty they are and how they're just frustrated by them. And not only the job posts themselves, but the quality of the posts and the information that's presented in them and all that stuff. And so we come out with this other service here, and we promote it on Archaeo Field Techs. We promote it on a couple other Facebook groups. And I just heard no discussion about it. Nothing good, nothing bad. For those of you who want to look at it while we're doing this, the address is www.pcscourses.com/jobs if you want to look at the jobs place. But can you guys, Bill, I know you're on Archaeo Field Techs a lot. Can you think of any reasons why people might not be talking about this stuff since we've been bitching about it for so long? I mean, it seems like... and the videos too. We've been talking about training, and then all of a sudden we put something out, and there's no discussion. So what the hell?
About the job post thing, the one thing that I can actually think of is that we actually all got jobs, and we didn't have as much time to cry about our lives as we did, since 2008. One thing I have been noticing though is people who have jobs, job postings that I actually know,
Mm-hmm.
are starting to email me or contact me about people that maybe, because Arizona, the folks there that were going to graduate, they just graduated. And so they're either on the job market or have already been snapped up. But also school's out. So companies here in Tucson and in southern Arizona that have projects coming up and they haven't staffed their offices yet. I've been getting a couple of calls and emails, text messages about, hey, do you know anyone who knows about, Four Corner stuff or HoHoCom or has ever done it? So they're looking, it's the same old thing. They want people who actually already have experience and they're trying to find them. But the fact that, they're actually, it's texting and emailing kind of signifies that maybe they aren't finding those. Maybe they're not just guys laying around on the ground like there used to be, where you just pick an archaeologist up, dust them off, and send her out to the field. And maybe the pickings are actually getting slim. But I also think that the market hasn't necessarily rebounded from the last time we all got laid off yet. So all those people who got the a pink slip in 2008 and since then and have found jobs since then and have moved on from archaeology, they're probably not going to come back. A lot of them aren't coming back, and we haven't trained a new cadre of people to fill those shoes yet. So they're trying to find people that actually have experience, but they actually in fact know they're probably not going to get those people, and they're going to have to train a greenhorn.
Right.
So I think that one of the reasons why we haven't been hearing much about the job posts is because people probably already have jobs. Doug, what do you think?
I think it has more to do with social media than job posts. One, Chris, I mean, you guys launched it, but you only have one job posting, so people are not. Luckily, people are reserving judgment until they actually see something, which is pretty rare.
That's
Also,
fair.
let's face it, it's Facebook, and those groups tend to be lots of people love to bitch. Not a lot of people love to talk as much about good things happening. It's just the nature of Facebook, of a lot of times with Twitter, is that a lot of it becomes sort of a yeah, talking about the negativity, not so much talking about how to solve it. And then once someone solves it, people don't feel the need to put their 2 cents in there because you have provided an answer. If there's no answer, if you have something open-ended like, oh my God, look at these job problems, blah, 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 everyone's going to throw in there with like, oh, you know why this is? Back in my day, blah, blah, blah.
Well, let's perform an experiment.
With
Yeah, let's perform.
Okay.
You put that up on Facebook, Doug. You should be like, what the hell's up with blah 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 blah, and we'll see how quickly it goes to 80 comments.
All right, I'll post in one of the groups some inflammatory like BS about your job posting thing, and we'll see.
Not about
I'm pretty
mine.
sure I can get. Oh no! Oh, good. Any press is good press, Chris.
I guess so. Yeah, page hits are page hits, right?
Yeah, I guess
I'll throw something up.
That's the only reason I have a blog. Because of bad comments.
Nice. Yeah, what the name for what I wanted you to post, Doug? Some inflammatory comment or something like that is called the title of every one of Bill's blog posts. That's what that's called. When you look that up on Wikipedia. Oh my God.
Yeah, no joke.
But that's the point. That's the point of a blog, though, Bill. So I appreciate it. The whole point is to state an opinion and generate conversation about the topic, and you do that extremely well. So, I mean, a shout out to PCS on your blog would be, handy. But whatever. I'm not going to push you into that. So, you too, Doug. But whatever. So
I got to watch all the videos, but so totally unrelated. Well, I guess it's related, but not related to my blog. Related to PCS. I actually showed a couple people the videos, other grad students, and they were just like, when was this made? Like, I didn't even know this was out there. Like, holy cow, this will be totally useful. And then they watched all the videos and they were just kind of like, yeah, that was pretty cool.
Nice.
There's more going to come. Like, it was just like, yeah, that was great. I ate that. And when's more going to happen? So they didn't have anything good or bad to say. They were just like, yeah, I learned a lot. Okay, where's the next one?
Nice.
I guess that's the problem that you're gonna face. You're gonna have to keep cranking out more and more videos.
Well, and we've got another 10 in the hopper that are going to be coming out slowly over the next few weeks, and then we've got others that we've actually written, and we stack all these up, and then the 4 or 5 of us, however many can get together, we will meet somewhere in the Western United States because we're all generally over here right now, and we'll set up a filming weekend. So we'll do that every 3 months or so, and we've got hopefully another one coming up, I think in July-ish, and then we edit those together and put them up on the website. So. But anyway, and just to encourage people, anyone hearing this that either has or hasn't gone to see the videos at PCS, go take a look because the good comments are nice, they're appreciated. We enjoy knowing that what we're doing is at least helping somebody or beneficial, and somebody sees the good in it. But honestly, the quote unquote negative or bad comments, they're not negative, they're just constructive. Constructive comments like, how can we make that better? How can we, what's missing? What should the next level video have for that topic? Because a lot of these are introductory videos, and they're meant to introduce the topic and not really fully flesh it out, just to kind of be a primer on whatever we're going to discuss. So yeah, we could really use some stuff like that. So moving on from PCS a little bit and job postings, while you guys are looking at job postings, this is kind of a segue into this next topic. So I somewhat in jest, Doug mentioned this morning that we should talk about email because of an interchange we had, or an exchange of email we had a couple days ago, where I'm going away from email personally. I use email now. I'm trying to use it only for communication with people that I don't actually know. And then I don't plan on calling on the phone, like if it's an initial call or something like that, or, a lot of client interactions happen via email. So there's that. And, slightly more, I guess, more professional interactions that I'm having that are not personal day-to-day interactions, right? So, when we plan a new episode of this podcast, I usually send out an email to 4 or 5 different people as a group email, and say, okay, here's what we're thinking about for this recording. When can we do it? And then there's this reply all back and forth. Sometimes some people forget to hit reply all and they only reply to me. Sometimes they do remember to hit reply all. And then there's this whole sort of confusion thing that happens on my part. I don't know if anybody else sees it, but we have these issues. And then with email, I don't know if everybody else is like this or not, but I obsessively keep nearly every email that I get that's not junk. And I sort it. I've got a CRM Archaeology podcast folder, and then I've got folders underneath that for groups of 10 episodes, like, 81 to 90 is what this group is in, because this is episode 85. And then I'll have episode 85 in there. Then I'll have all the communications involved in that. When it's just us, that's not that big a deal, but sometimes we'll have an interview, and I want to keep all those so we have that contact information and things like that. So I keep all that stuff. And because of that, sometimes I just don't get around to... I'm getting better at deleting them too, honestly. But sometimes I don't get around to organizing that stuff. Then I go look at my inbox, which is a unified inbox on my Apple email that includes my Apple email and about 6 different Gmail addresses for different companies I'm involved in. And I get probably 100 to 200 emails a day that aren't junk, that I have to address, that I have to file somewhere or comment on or address in some way or another. And I would probably say... easily, now I haven't done the metrics on this, easily 80 to 90% of those are simply one-word replies. They're, thanks. That's my most hated email of all time, is just thanks and a reply and their huge signature block and then the whole email history. And it's stuff like that I'm trying to get away from for my closer interactions, my more consistent interactions. So that's still the gold standard in CRM is still pretty much email. Okay. I mean, you can call, but even a lot of job postings will say specifically don't call, and they'll just say email this email address. So we wanted to talk about just in the last few minutes here, some email etiquette. A lot of people might be, like I know Bill was looking at a company this week, and he did what everybody else does, and you looked him up on social media, and then you even prompted the question on Archaeo Field Text, has anybody heard about this company? And that's a good thing to do because we'll all check that out. Now, you might have found out that one of the PIs or something is actually on that group, and they're seeing this interaction, and then maybe you start talking to them behind the scenes. If you know them, great. If you don't know them, that's probably not the most professional way to start an initial conversation with a potentially new employer, right? So, you want to do something that's a little more official. Send them an email, with your cover letter and CV if that's appropriate. and just start the interaction that way. But you don't necessarily want to do it on Facebook unless they're the type of people you can do that. Like if somebody approached me on Facebook, that would be totally fine because I'm on there all the time. And I understand that it can be a more professional medium. You can approach me on LinkedIn. You can send me a tweet. I honestly don't care, but most people aren't going to be like that. So you have to know your audience. What do you guys think?
I'll jump in on this one because I just did it recently and it actually worked out really well, right?
Yeah.
So I used to, when I saw job posts, well, in the beginning, and I was just hungry to find a job, I was more willing to just kind of, accept positions, and go to a place and then find out if the company sucked. But that was also pre-Slack, pre-Facebook, like everything, right? So really the only way that you ever knew a company was good was with our old Stone Age email that we emailed our friends, or we just straight up called them and said, hey, how's it going? Do you know about this company? Oh, are they good? Oh, you don't know? Call your friend, right? So it was like this whole message tree, you'd call people and figure it all out. But what I thought was cool was I was able to just, first of all, I spent, like I always tell everyone, every job post, I spent time looking for all the people at that company that I possibly knew. So I tried to find them on LinkedIn. I tried to find them on Facebook or wherever, and just look and see, like, what are they interested in, and do I have any kind of commonality? Like, did I go to a school? Am I a fan of their team? Do I like, eco villages or something like that? Anything that I can figure out about the folks to try and just have some kind of common interest, but also to get a deeper insight into like their professional lives. And so I spent a while doing that and wrote down some notes, and I actually didn't know anyone at these companies. A couple of them were on LinkedIn and a couple of them had like Facebook profiles and stuff, but it wasn't really anything to go on, right? So yeah, then I did go to social media, and what I found out for the first time is that I've been telling people for a long time they need to manage their own profile on social media, because that can play a huge role in the way that people think about them. But now I just realized that companies need to watch it because they're being watched on social media. And in about 20 minutes, I had like 9 responses that were all saying, oh, these guys are all good. Now imagine if this is a company that had pulled some kind of crazy move on their crew, and then I talk on social media and I get 9 responses like, oh, they ripped me off. Oh, they're horrible. Oh, they didn't pay me overtime. It was this huge problem getting my per diem out of them. Like, watch out, those guys are shady. If that had happened, I would have just not even thought about applying to the job, right?
Yeah.
So I guess companies need to watch out because now it's a double-edged sword. But basically, the email thing, personally, so my email management system is turn on my computer, set a timer, in 15 minutes, I'm done with emails. So we're going to just delete every single possible thing that I can. And so I just go through my email system and start deleting. And that's something that I learned doing cultural resources. So I know these hiring managers do the same thing. They come to work, they look through the emails, and they just start to delete. Then after that, they go back through, and there's like 20 kernels of decent, email that they need to actually respond to. And they spaz out a 1-sentence response, right? So if you email them and say, hi, I'm Bill White, I really like doing archaeology and I need a job, they're just going to look at that thing real fast and be like, in about a fourth of a second, they'll decide whether that's a delete or whether it's a later. It's definitely not going to be a now, right? And we all know that later never comes. That's the reason why I have 2,000 old dead emails that are in there in my mailbox, because they were all stuff that I never ever came back to. The only way to get around it is to call. You got to talk to them on the phone. So there's a bunch of different strategies that you use to be cordial and professional with that, but Slack, Facebook, email, none of them supplant a phone call.
Yeah, but you got to be careful though, because some job postings specifically say no calls. So if you're calling about a job, they might not want that. If you're calling to just do some research and say, hey, I'm moving to the area, do you guys, expect anything? What can you tell me? Blah, 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 blah. I would say a call that way is probably okay. But then again, keep in mind too, you're probably going to get their voicemail unless if you happen to find a cell phone. If you get their office number, then yeah, they'll probably have to answer the phone. I get an unknown number on my cell phone. I let it go to voicemail. So
yeah, me too. But so you're right. You got to watch it. You got to be, judicious on making calls and stuff like that, especially if the job post specifically says don't call. Then,
right.
Yeah, you don't call about that job post.
Well,
But if there's any kind
so
of way that you can sneak in a call, I'm telling you, that's way better than an email.
Mm-hmm.
yeah, and also if they're saying don't call, it's probably not a position you want to be going for. So imagine, no, think about it, like most hiring managers would prefer to talk with a potential employee before they hire them, just from the simple fact that they kind of want to find out if you're a serial killer slash some sort of weirdo, calling up, and it's a lot
Mm-hmm.
quicker to do that on a phone call, and they're gonna call you anyways if they're going through the thing. But when they say no phone calls, and that's something that's popped up mainly because of the massive recession.
Yeah.
You know, basically you'd get 200 phone calls and it would overwhelm you. Well, if someone's saying no phone calls, that means they're expecting 100 applications.
Mm-hmm.
Your chances of getting that job anyways are almost, I'm not going to say nil, but um, sending a blind CV with 100 other blind CVs, I'm
Yeah.
pretty sure Vegas, you have better odds of just spending some money to go to Vegas and try to win your wages than trying to get a job that way.
Yeah.
You really do. You need those personal connections because if you're going through 100 resumes or that's come in the last 2 hours, you're going to stop as soon as you get the closest person that you want to hire, which might be someone that you vaguely know, or you look at their CV for a second and say, oh, they've worked for so and so. I know my buddy Joe over there. Let me call him up and see if this person's okay. They're not going to get through 100 CVs. So
Yeah.
I don't know. When anyone says no phone calls, it usually means they're expecting a lot of jobs, and it means you really don't have much of a chance of getting that job anyways. I'm with Bill. If at all possible, phone call first. And usually what the phone call is assessing you out to say, okay, this person's not a serial killer. And I'll be like, all right, you sound decent enough. Send in your CV, and then you send it in.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah,
Yeah.
I'm with Bill. Phone call
So
first.
I figured the trick out.
Mm-hmm.
You just upload a massive writing sample that's too huge to email, and when it gets bounced back, you call them and say, my thing got bounced back.
I think I bounced back. Nice. Little hack there.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I didn't get to talk to the hiring manager. He was in a meeting, but I talked to him and scheduled a time to talk with him. So,
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Well, there you go. All right. So keep these tips in mind when you're applying for jobs this year, and then when you do apply for a job, ask them if they posted that job on PCS, and if they say no, ask them why not, and then direct them over there. It's free right now, so we're extending the free out past the end of May. I think we're going to go through the end of June probably. We haven't really decided that, so and it's only going to be a nominal fee after that just to afford actually doing it. So. Still cheaper than some of the other resources out there. So anyway, we're going to go to break right now and come back and talk about something that'll really have an impact on CRM in 2017. Professional Certifications for Scientists, or PCS, aims to provide practical educational videos, field guides, knowledge tests, professional certifications, and employment connections to professional scientists everywhere. Check out the jobs page for job listings in contract archaeology. Post a job for just $50. All of PCS's jobs are verified and checked for completeness. Find PCS jobs at www.pcscourses.com/jobs. PCS, a place for good scientists to become great science professionals. All right, we're back, and before we get into our next segment, we're going to tidy up the email discussion just a little bit with a few comments from Doug.
Yeah, so if you are sending in a resume, via email, some useful tips for people. One, don't start your email with "sup," unless it's your really good buddy who you're okay with that. You know, and also don't send emails, or even this extends to your cover letter as well. Don't send something that says "Dear Madam" slash "Sir," or something like that. Like, actually try to find out the person who you're trying to send your resume to. And this is actually a really good thing. Another hack is a good excuse to call someone up is to be like, "Hi, I saw your job posting. Who do I send? who do I address my cover letter to? And
Mm-hmm.
that gives you a name at the very least. Or if you can't find anyone, or you're just sending a blind CV resume in, use dear company name. Don't do something generic like dear person or human being. It doesn't do a good impression. It
Yeah.
sounds so generic that that's gonna maybe get you deleted, especially if some people are looking through their emails and they're not even opening it. They're just seeing that sort of snippet of first sentence of text, and all they see is dear sir, madam, whatever. They're just gonna be like, oh, this is probably spam, and
Mm-hmm.
you may not even get your email opened. But yeah, definitely try to find a name to send it to and address it to someone. And then also, if you're sending a cover letter and your resume or CV, one document. Like,
One
there's
PDF.
no
Yeah.
reason why you should. Yeah, there's no reason why you should send 2 or 3 documents unless they specifically ask for multiple different documents
Mm-hmm.
that you can't put together for some reason. I'm thinking like if you maybe get like they're asking for transcripts or something for some job,
Right.
and you have to have that sent separately or something like that. But you know, people get really annoyed when you're downloading like 3 or 4 documents that someone sent through, and you have to open them all up, and you're just taking up time. Just put it in one single document and send it.
And
And
make sure that document's
definitely,
titled appropriately too, like with your name, your full name, first and last.
yeah,
Yeah.
and also says CV or resume or cover letter, and yeah, give as much detail because they're going to get a bajillion CV. That's all it's going to say, or resume, titled documents, and there's a good chance that they'll put it all in the same folder. And if 2 people put in their resume, they may just erase your resume and copy over someone else's that also happen to have the same title.
It's a good point.
Yeah, and if you are writing an email to like send it in, don't just say see attached.
Mm-hmm.
Spend the time to just do at least 2 sentences, which might just be, dear company name, I saw your job advertisement, and definitely mention what job you are applying for. Um, I've looked at applications where people send them in, and we're only advertising for one position, so we kind of knew what they were applying for.
Mm-hmm.
But if people don't know, they might just toss it. They're not going to spend the time to email you back and say, what are you applying for?
Right.
So say, dear so and so, please, I've attached my application for this. Even in your email, say, I'm available to work right away. I've worked, just a little bit of a selling, not like an email should not be a cover letter.
Mm-hmm.
A cover letter is a very specific thing that should be in its own document, but give just a little information, sell yourself just a little with 2 to 3 sentences saying something about, I saw your job advertising in the American Southwest. Oh, I've worked there for 10 years. I'd love to get back there to work. Something really, enthusiastic, briefly, 2 to 3 sentences. And then, also, I guess, I know we could probably do a whole podcast on like resumes and CVs and stuff like that.
Right.
But
Well, and I think we
yeah,
I'm
have.
if
down.
you,
I think we have
I'm
before, and
down.
we need to do it like annually, right? So it refreshes in people's minds rather than just replay the old episode. And we need to move on a little bit, but just a couple more points on that. One thing Bill said in the background, hiring managers are busy and they're not going to spend more than 1 to 3 minutes on your application. So that's why it's good if you have a cover letter, then put this here. If you don't have a cover letter for some reason, then put it in the email, but mention some things that were actually in the job posting. If they're specifically looking for somebody with, I don't know, 15 years of experience on Great Basin pottery, then mention you have 15 years of experience on Great Basin pottery, like right there in the thing, and then that'll prompt them to look a little more. So, Doug, go ahead and continue.
yeah, I was also going to say your email signature. So if you're applying for a job, I know we've already said this, but like don't have an email, and this is like generic advice you find on the internet, but
Mm-hmm.
if you're sending it in, don't have an email like um, you know, the world sucks at gmail.com or something like that. Have an appropriate email, and then also like make sure that it's appropriate. Make sure it's sort of short so people can semi-remember it. And then think about having a signature. And if
Mm-hmm.
that means having a separate email from your personal one, do it. But have a signature that is, I am, wherever, and especially, higher up you're going to have a bunch of little, doctor, masters, RPA, CIFA if you're over here, all that sort of different stuff, a bit about you, and then like your contact details, which is also, email and um, phone number. And I know it sounds really redundant to say, well, wait, I'm sending an email, I should put my email in the email.
Mm-hmm.
But like a lot of programs now, it's really annoying me, but Outlook essentially will sometimes um, convert an email to the person's name, and then it's really hard to copy and paste out of, like, God, Microsoft is pissing me off to no end. Like anytime I get an email through that, it's so tedious to try to copy and paste and get their email. And also, you might get your email sent along to someone else.
Mm-hmm.
It might forward it along, and it might not, in the forwarding, it might just have your name. Like again, Microsoft is a real pain in the ass for this, but
Mm-hmm.
they'll forward just the name, and it'll say from your name, but it won't actually have your email address. So if people have to spend 5 minutes trying to hunt down your contact details from an email you sent or how to try to respond to you, they'll probably give up, actually.
Yeah.
So yeah, if you're sending an email, have a good, a good signature. Don't do anything that like has a inspirational quote. I guess you could possibly get away with it, but I, I think you're just playing with fire. You want to look professional. You want to have, your name, your contact details, and something along those lines. Think of it. It shouldn't be a cover letter, but should give people enough information that they want to learn more about you, and they want to be able to easily contact you.
Yeah, all this comes down to psychology, really, and the studies have been done. People, we're well aware of what, business people who are looking at CVs and resumes and things like that. We're well aware of the pressure that they're under, and what they're willing to look at and what they're willing to spend time on looking at. And it's like it might even sound, I don't know, it might even sound dirty to some people or shady to, sort of craft something that psychologically gets into somebody's head, whether you're putting something in a subject line or something in the body of the email that says, that's intended to stick out. But you have to do that. I mean, you have to do that if they're going to get 100 to 200 applications for this one job. And this time of year, they probably are, and because everybody is out of work over the winter and everybody needs work now. So, and it's a great time to work in CRM, especially this time of year, because it's not like super hot in a lot of places. Of course, it is in some places, and it's not super cold in a lot of places. It's really, great environment to be doing this in. So there's a lot of people out there looking for jobs, and you just need to give them the information that they need. One of the analogies I was thinking of was like selling a house. People stage their houses these days. They'll actually hire professional stagers to go in and do that, because I know when I bought a house a long time ago, I looked at probably 80 houses before we actually settled on one. And some of those houses you went into, it's really difficult to envision your things in there and to envision your ideas on that house when somebody else's crap is just everywhere, right? It's just all over the walls. So, when you're selling a house, you'll strip it down, you'll paint the walls white again, you'll, move some furniture around, you'll get rid of all your clutter, you'll do all that stuff. Well, it's the same. And that's so somebody can envision, their selves in that environment. So it's the same thing with the emails. Quite honestly, that does kind of come back around. It's the same thing. And you're trying to give somebody exactly what they want, right? And if you don't have that, don't make it up. Well, that's not what we're saying at all. But give them exactly what they asked for in the job posting, and maybe just a little bit more that's on point with what they need. Go ahead.
So actually, I got 2 more points. One is, I think we briefly mentioned this, but if you're attaching any documents,
Mm-hmm.
send a PDF. Some companies that are super cheap, and they have not upgraded from like Office 2003. So if you send a docx, they won't be able to open it. Well, they could go on the internet and get it converted or something like that. But
Mm-hmm.
Try to send something that's easily openable, and pretty much any computer can open a PDF. And then one last sort of comment to make is, people should consider what their professional name's going to be, and that
Mm-hmm.
should be attached to your email as well. So if you have a first name, middle name, and you go by, your middle name, don't put your first name. Just
Right.
use the name that you want to be called by and be professional. And then um, here's something else that people should consider is if you are a woman or if your name is not typically Anglo-Saxon sounding, you may want to consider going by initials.
Mm-hmm.
Just because you could possibly run into discrimination where people subconsciously or very consciously might look at it and say, "Oh, I got a resume from Sarah. Well, she's a woman. She won't be able to handle the arrow." Sexist bullshit like that. Sorry, Chris, didn't mean to cuss on the podcast. I know you'll have to bleep that out, but yeah, it's a real factor. And so basically, I mean, there's a lot, we were talking about earlier, there's a lot of studies. And if you have a name that doesn't sound, traditionally white, you might have actually a harder time. And so you may want to consider, an initial, D, so D, your last name, and stuff like that. And I mean, if you don't have a very traditional sounding sorry, not traditional, I shouldn't say that, a very Anglo-white sounding last name, there's not much you can do about that. But especially if you're a lady, you may want to consider having your professional name be initials. Just because you will face some level of discrimination at some point. And I know it's really, God, I hate giving advice like this because it's sort of one of those things like, horrible advice to have to be able to give it, but it is something that people should really consider. Is, if you're a lady or if your name doesn't sound traditionally white, you may want to consider going by initials, which is shit that I have to give that advice in this day and age, but it is something, if you're looking for a job, you may want to consider.
It would be interesting to hear some comments from people who have done this and then not done this on different things to see if they've had a different response. I'd like to see what the actual discussion on that is. That's leading us into a very different place here on this podcast right now, but I mean, it is crappy advice to have to give, but it might actually work for somebody in the right environment. I mean, if you're looking for a job in a certain area or something like that, there could be more discrimination one way or the other, depending. So, and often that's where some social media research comes in too. Like Bill was doing, you can try to go to the website, look up the principal employees, and then see if they're on social media and see if you're already friends with them, for one thing, like on LinkedIn or something like that. And then see if you can't get a sense of what kind of people they are. And if you just from doing that get the sense that you need to change your name a little bit to get the job, then maybe you shouldn't apply for that job. That's one thing right there.
Conversely, you can keep your name as is and don't use initials as a way to sort of do your own self-selecting of employers.
Right.
But sometimes you're desperate for a job, so
I hear you. All right, well, we're going to jump into break a little early here because we went a little long in the last segment, and I don't want to break up the next conversation. So we're going to finish up with a discussion about the new overtime rule, which is going to have a significant impact on CRM next year. But first, here's I believe our third tip from Christopher Dorr at Heritage Business International. They recorded some like CRM and Heritage Business tips for us, and we're running those segments. So check that out and check out their website. So back in a minute.
Hi, everyone. This is Christopher Dorr with Heritage Business International, and here is this week's Heritage Business tip from the archive. This week, we look at the value of relationships. For sales effectiveness, don't chase jobs. Instead, build relationships. With a strong relationship, you will have a career of work. If you win a job, that's all you get. To receive our most up-to-date heritage business tips, you can subscribe to our free weekly email at heritagebusiness.org. Until next time, this is Christopher Dorr.
All right, we're back. And some of you may have heard last week at this point, because this podcast is coming out on May 25th, I believe. Yes, May 25th. So I believe it was a week ago, as you're hearing this, that it was announced that the Obama administration signed into effect a rule. I heard it called a rule. I don't actually know what kind of piece of legislation this is. What I do know is it goes into effect on December 1st, 2016. And it's basically being called the overtime rule. So... and that's an existing rule. It's been around for a long time, actually. And the way the rule exists right now, and the way this affects CRM, actually, I've been personally affected by this, is that salaried employees had to make a minimum of $23,660 per year. There's a monthly equivalent of that, and perform some managerial tasks to be exempt from getting paid overtime. Okay, so. To put that into real world terms, a company could call you a crew chief, put you on salary, and then have you do 3 hours worth of paperwork at the end of every single day to sum up your day and not pay you for it legally, because if they're paying you a minimum of $23,660 a year, per diem doesn't count. That's not part of your salary. And then you're performing managerial tasks because you're a crew chief. You're actually managing people. So that's how that affects us right now. But the new rule that starts on December 1st, 2016, is it doubles that salary test, they call it, to $47,476 per year, or $913 per week. What they call the duties test still applies, but only to workers making more than $47K a year. So what that means is if you're making less than the $47,000, we're just going to call it $47K for simplicity, but know that that's $47,476 per year, or $913 per week. If you're making under that and you're salaried and you're in a managerial position, you will qualify for overtime. So let's just let that sink in for a second. If you're a crew chief or a project manager, or even a PI, like PIs in the Southeast probably make about that, maybe less, like new PIs. And you're definitely working more than 40 hours a week if you're a PI. You're probably working more than 40 hours a week if you're a project manager. If you're not, I don't know how you're keeping up with everything. And you're likely working more than 40 hours a week if you're a crew chief, because there's always stuff to do at the end of the day for crew chiefs, right? Unless you've got a field director. It's a huge project and you've got a field director or something like that. So you're probably on salary, and they're probably not paying you overtime because it's legal for them to not do that. But now, next field season, 2017, they will have to pay you overtime. Now, there are going to obviously be ways to get around that because people are crafty and lawyers exist. But that's what we're going to talk about right now, is how this really affects everything. Before we get into how it's going to affect people next year, Doug, you've done a lot of research into pay and positions and things like that. Have you ever done any metrics that say or any polls or anything like that ask how many people are actually on salary? Because you've done a lot of stuff on salary, on annual pay and things like that. But do we know how many of those people are technically hourly and how many are salary? And has that bit research even been done?
Not in the U.S. It hasn't been done. And typically, and this is the problem, is a lot of data I use also comes from job postings. And so most of those typically, field tech, I don't know anyone who's salaried as a field tech.
Right.
I haven't seen I've seen maybe one or two out of 15 years of data. So at least at the entry level, that is almost non-existent. And then above that, it's really hard to tell. People don't tend to give good data, good numbers on pay once you get higher up. So I don't really have anything other than say it's probably not applicable to any field tech, probably not most crew chiefs, and it might get more common the higher up you go. But honestly, I would think it would burn too many people out at the field tech level or anything lower. And actually, so typically most business owners tend to be salaried, not by choice, but that's how it works out. You know, you may pay yourself for 40 hours, but you're working 80. But there's no money because that's your business. So,
Well,
I mean, Chris,
let me jump in. Yeah, I'll jump in.
How do you do your payment? Yeah.
Well, because I'm an LLC and I'm a single member LLC, I'm actually not even allowed to collect a paycheck from what I've been told, right? I do what's called an owner draw. So I just take out money from my account when I need it and however much I need, quite honestly. I mean, I've never, I've really focused on keeping money in my business. Yeah, and what Bill's saying in the background, you have to document that. Of course, you have to document that. It counts as income on your taxes. It's not an expense. So, but I mean, for my business, I don't even know, actually. It's all buried in my taxes somewhere. I don't even know what I technically, quote unquote, made last year because it's all wrapped up into my personal stuff and with my wife and all that stuff. So I could probably pull that out of QuickBooks pretty easily, but I haven't done that. Yeah, the point of that story is I wasn't salaried and I wasn't hourly either. And so I don't even count under my own workers' comp insurance. Like I was required to carry workers' comp, of course, even if I didn't have any employees as part of my professional and general liability. But I'm not covered. I have to cover my own work expenses, or my own medical expenses if something were to happen. Luckily, I have VA, so I can use that. But I'm not covered under my own workers' comp policy, which is kind of total and complete BS. But what about your guys' own personal experiences? I have an answer for this, but Bill and Doug, in this country, in the United States, have you ever been salaried for? Have you ever been salaried? First, end of question, and then for what positions have you been salaried?
Yeah, I knew about this. I knew about this, like basically homework when the field work follows you home, and basically if you don't do it, you will, like, the next day in the field it's going to be tougher, or like months later when you get into the office, you're going to be totally screwed, right? And so
yeah.
If you're the person in charge of that project, or one of the crew chiefs, or in any way have any supervisory duty, we don't usually allocate time in the field to do all the quality assurance stuff that you have to do to make sure your paperwork's all correct, or to make sure that all the artifacts are properly, stowed away or whatever. But also the environment, sometimes it's bad weather and you don't really want to be out there longer, right? So you spend most of your time surveying and digging, and all that quality checking and, editing and all that other stuff of people's paperwork. That's basically like in the truck on the way back, or, at your hotel room, basically. So you don't, I'm trying to think about this because it's basically illegal what you do. You basically swallow that time.
Yeah.
So, you're supposed to report all those hours that you're using at the hotel to sort out everything in the field, right? But because your salary, you're only going to get paid for a finite amount. And so you don't really necessarily note all that extra project hours that are done at the hotel, right? I mean, this is just a reality. Also, you kind of keep your own track of how many hours you're doing that stuff, so that sometimes lunch is just longer, or like you just don't come in on time, right? And of course, it can get to be a problem if the company is like, having you check in at a certain time and having you clock out at another time or whatever, which I've never seen in a CRM company. Like, it's just kind of on the honor system. But if you're one of those people that's always taking 2 and 3 hour lunches when you're in the office, but you're not really like putting in the extra work or something like that, or people aren't aware that you're putting in that extra work, they're going to say something about it. But if they say something about it and you are actually doing all that work in the hotel room, you just stop doing it. And then when you stop doing it, they see the impact of you not putting in that extra work, right?
Yeah.
Or you get fired. Either which way, you find a new job, or you find some free time for yourself. So that's like the unstated reality of being a crew chief or a project director. If you're salary, you just are not going to get paid for all the hours that you put in. And if you actually did get paid for the true hours that you put in, then your company would not be able to get contracts, because the hours, it would just basically take too long, right? So I, knowing that, have tried before, like every single time when I'm negotiating my wages, to negotiate the wage that I want. And then right after that, I try to negotiate to be hourly, and they always say no.
Well, they might say yes now.
Well, they
Well, I
might
know,
say
like
yes
even
now.
even if you're hourly, like it doesn't really, in a lot of those jobs, it doesn't really matter. So you could be hourly and you could be doing all that work in the hotel room, and you're basically doing that work so you can complete the project and not get fired.
Mm-hmm.
And there's no way, like, even if you were hourly, yeah, you could try to charge them for that and then you'll be let go instantly. I mean, there's just no, there's there's work that's put down officially. So I mean, I would
Yeah.
say a good portion of people working in CRM are on hourly contracts. You guys can't see it, but I'm doing air quotes. Um, and that is basically people. I'd say the vast majority are paid hourly. Unfortunately, there's so much extra work that you end up taking home or doing in the hotel room or anything like that. But you do it to get the work done, and the company would I'm not going to say never pay you, but probably cannot afford to pay you. I mean, a lot of these projects are budgeted on, so many days of people's work, and I'm sure people would love to pay more, but
Mm-hmm.
they've only can pay so much out of the budget before, you're taking a loss. So I'd say, yeah, probably in theory, most people in CRM are on hourly contracts, but in reality, most of them are working the equivalent of a salaried
Yeah.
like contract, just not it's not official.
Well, we need to keep in mind too that there's a lot of different ways that companies can handle this situation. Like, for example, one of the first, actually, I think the second company I worked for here in the Great Basin. Once I was promoted to crew chief, I was put on salary, but yeah, Bill, like Bill's talking about the background banking hours. So I was put on salary, and as a crew chief, you're really one salaried task, like that was like involved extra hours was the post work documentation. So they required an email and a phone call actually to one of a couple different supervisors that are back in the office or back in the main office. And so they required that of you. And then, like, depending on the project, there might be a lot more write-up. Like, there was a project we did where we were finding 100 to 150, sometimes 200 mining features per day. We ended up calling it a district, so we were just recording these features. But we'd have in our Write in the Rain notebooks, these feature descriptions, and those had to be written up into a spreadsheet and then emailed daily. And that took hours. Now, of course, me being me, and they didn't know this because they did know this because I told them. I actually created a spreadsheet on my iPad for doing that, and it was before I was using tap forms or anything like that. And I was just writing all my feature descriptions up in my iPad and then simply hitting, send at the end of the day. and it was complete. And my wife, who was also a crew chief, she was spending the 2 to 3 hours typing all her stuff up. And they weren't acknowledging that at all. So I ended up just charging them for the 2 or 3 hours anyway, because they were giving us comp time for that. Now, comp time is an interesting thing, and I'm willing to bet it's more legal in other places than not, because companies can get away with a lot of stuff if nobody calls them on it. They're simply, we like to think that the government is doing this massive oversight on all these things, but there just simply isn't the time or resources to do that. So if a company is calling something comp time, like comp time for that company was basically anything over 40 hours for the week was banked, and you could take it out anytime you wanted as cash, or you could take it out as days off, basically. So, but comp time was straight time. It wasn't a time and a half. It was just straight time. And I know we were making less than 47,000, so we would have qualified for the overtime. We were not making, however, less than the 23,000. So under the current rule, we actually didn't qualify for overtime. So I guess they were kind of doing it right. And I don't know if it was just a Nevada law or whatever, but legally, were they supposed to pay it? Did they even have to give us the comp time, or were they just doing that out of the, because they thought they had to, or something like that? I honestly don't really know. But they had several different levels of salaried employee too. And there was salaried without benefits, which is totally shitty. So we just got, the only benefit we got was comp time. So we actually got paid for our work. Boo, that shouldn't be a benefit. That should be a right. But, And then they're salaried with benefits. So then the health insurance and all that stuff kicks in. But you have to look in your state, call your Department of Labor or whatever, do it anonymously if you want, and just say, hey, this is what my company's doing. Is that legal? You might find that it's legal. It's illegal, but in your favor, or illegal and in the company's favor, more likely. So, just find out, basically, is a question to that. And as far as Bill's question too, or Doug asking whether or not field techs are salaried, I would say in smaller companies, they do have salaried field techs. Sometimes these people even have master's degrees. I mean, it's a really small company. They have a lot of really small projects, and their quote unquote field technician might actually do some report writing as well, because it is a small company. So their field tech person does field tech duties, but they're salaried. That's kind of a little workaround. It's not a field tech in the way we're probably thinking about it, like on a big project. Those people probably aren't salaried. On the other hand, there's companies like Berger back east, and I don't know if they still do this, but if you worked for them more than, 90 days or 120 days or something like that, you got benefits. Like if you were on a project that just happened to go longer than whatever the minimum days are, I can't remember what they are, you got benefits, health insurance, the whole thing. So, and Doug's mentioning in the background here that we needed to define some of these terms. Doug, why don't you kick that off? I've been talking for a little while. Why don't you define some of these terms that we're talking about in the way that you understand them?
Yeah. So, in the way I would understand them is hourly is you're paid for basically by the hour. I mean, I'd say that it's the most common way to be paid. So they say they're going to pay you $15 an hour, and you work, 10 hours, that's $150, but then you have taxes and Social Security and blah, blah, blah. But salaried essentially says we're going to pay you, I mean, it could be by week or month or year, a fixed amount.
Mm-hmm.
And that occasionally works quite well if you can. So, you calculate it out. You're like, oh, that's, that comes out to like $18 an hour if I only work 40 hours a week. And if you work under that, you're making more money for less work. But I've never known anyone to really work to have salaried where it works in their favor.
Mm-hmm.
Usually it means you'll work over 40 hours a week. You'll be working 50, but still getting paid a fixed amount. So essentially you're guaranteed a fixed amount for a period of work, and how much work you do or do not do can vary widely. That's basically salaried versus hourly. And there might be, I think there's some, I don't know the actual things, but there are some federal regulations also about salaried.
Mm-hmm.
And there's also things about, benefits you get, and different things that count towards it. And also taxes slightly different as well.
Well, yeah, and some of the benefits to a salaried position may not be monetary, right? So sure, you might be putting in 50 hours a week, but maybe what comes along with that 50, 60 hours a week is the fact that you've got a job year round. At least you're more secure than somebody who's not salaried, right? They'll probably be let go first. Now, of course, being salaried doesn't mean you're guaranteed a job. I mean, if the company has no projects, you're going to get laid off. That's just a fact. But you'll get laid off last. And then, there's the pay. It's usually a slightly higher pay amount, regardless the salaried amount, not all the time, but slightly higher. Like I said, there's the security of being there all the time. They'll find something for you to do. And then there's benefits. Benefits often come with salary, whether that's health insurance and, some kind of investment program or something like that. That will often accompany salaried. So you can't look at being salaried as, oh, I'm just working 60 hours a week and not getting paid for 20. You're getting all those other things if the company's doing it right. And that does have a monetary value if that's what you're concerned with. So, and it might be better, but if you don't want all that, then go find yourself an hourly job and just bank the cash if you can. So, it's totally up to you. But I got one last thing to say on the how companies can get around this overtime thing, but Bill, go ahead.
Yeah, the biggest difference in this whole thing is the management tasks versus just field tasks.
Mm-hmm.
In my experience, In my experience, sometimes the field work just continues going and there's like no way around it. Like you will not go home after 8 hours. You're not going to go home after the 10 hours or whatever you're supposed to work that day because you just have to get more work done. And when that happens, the entire crew is out there in the field doing the work or doing the survey. And you just honestly record your hours the way that they come. If you spend a 12-hour day out there, the whole crew writes down that they spent 12 hours out there. And that just kind of automatically transforms into overtime. And companies can kind of get frustrated about it because it can blow budgets sky high if you find more than you thought, or the digging's not happening as fast as they estimated. But doing something like what we're talking about, where you're not really reporting all your hours on a massive scale for the entire crew, is like, not only is it unethical and illegal, but it's setting you up to be blacklisted as one of those bad companies, right? That rips off employees. So when we're in the field and it goes long and we spend even like half an hour or an hour longer, everybody just reports their time honestly. And I do my best to try and make up those hours later on with a shorter day, right? In order to make sure things stay on task. But sometimes that's not possible. Sometimes whole months go overtime, which is not good at all for the company, but you just do your best to not get sued. Now, in those cases, the people who are not necessarily even doing management tasks or supervisory tasks, the field techs, just basically everybody, they're putting in extra hours and they're getting paid according to their work. They're not really swallowing that extra hotel time that we were just talking about. The ones that would get affected, I think, the most from this are the people who are doing supervisory work, and then they try to actually report all that stuff honestly, and then it consistently looks like they're getting more than 40 hours a week. I know most employers are going to say, hey, how come you're not getting your work done in 40 hours? And,
Right.
The immediate response will be, well, because there's more work than there is 40 hours. And then the response from the company will be, okay, then we'll just find someone else who can get all that work done in 40 hours. They're not going to adjust how much labor you have to actually do. They're just going to adjust who's doing the labor until they find someone who's doing it all in 40 hours, which if that means eating hotel time or not banking their hours or basically not reporting all their effort, that's what's going to end up happening. So whether this is legal or not, or ethical or not, that's what just is. I mean, we have this new rule, and I would hope that by having this rule, companies would say, man, we got to start paying these people more than 47,000, which crazily in cultural resources is going to actually improve wages for a lot of people. We got to pay these people more because we don't want to get in this overtime situation. But the reality is, they're just going to find people who can eat it until they can adjust accordingly.
Hourly and salaried can also lead to sort of tensions in crews as well, in a sense that a lot of techs, if you're being paid hourly, and if you're going to be getting time and a half, you don't mind working extra. I remember one of the first projects I did, we were doing 50-hour weeks. Well, actually, we were doing 10 days on, 4 days off, but it was 10-hour days. And it was good because I was looking to save up a lot of money and was making a lot of money. But people higher up in the management were not. It was a lot of pressure on them because basically we were looking for anything possible to drag out the days, and they basically weren't, because that meant they weren't getting extra. They weren't getting time and a half, and they basically were eating the time while we were actually making pretty good bank on it. So it does cause some sort of conflicts and different working environments when people are working hourly and their goal is to make a lot of money, or at least more money than they currently are. They'll want to work more hours, and if you're salaried, you're not necessarily really wanting to work more hours.
Yeah, so that's a good point. And we're going to close out this podcast, but I'm going to leave you with one example and a caution to those of you making $22 an hour right now. Because $22 an hour at 40 hours a week, at 52 weeks a year, is $45,760. Okay. Now that puts you under the $47,476 threshold for if you're a manager getting paid that, so you're a crew chief or above and you're getting paid that, they have to pay you overtime under the new rule. Okay. So, But if you're working, if you're salaried currently with that, and let's just say for ease of the math, you're working an extra 10 hours a week, so an extra couple hours a day. You're working an extra 10 hours a week. You're actually, with your overtime at $22 an hour and then your overtime at $33, which is what that would be, I believe, you're actually making $54,340 an hour. So if all of you people getting paid $22 an hour right now that are managers and are salaried suddenly get $1 raise, okay? If you get $1 raise before the end of this year and you're making $23 an hour, that'll boost you to $47,840, which is $400 over the minimum. So they won't have to pay you that overtime. You'll actually take a huge pay cut. So if they're going to give you a raise to get out of this overtime rule, for you to be making that $54 an hour still, you're actually going to have to get raised to about $26.30 an hour. So you're going to have to get a $4.30 per hour raise. Keep that in mind when you're doing this math, okay? If you want to get back up to what you were making with your extra 10 hours a week, then you're going to have to do that. It's going to be... it's going to be real tricky because a lot of people in California make in that range. They make around $22 an hour. Even field techs make $22 an hour. So this might be a moot point for people that are in management positions because a lot of project managers make more than that in California. So they're probably already over the $47,000 because you can't even rent an apartment in California for $47,000 a year. But so maybe that's not an issue. I don't know. But keep it in mind when you're looking for a job. So anyway, I'd love to see some comments on this and know... comment wherever you see this, comment to us on the website, comment everywhere. I'd like to see, if you are salaried, is this rule going to affect you? Are you looking at $1 pay raise to get out of it? Is your company even talking about it? Are they saying it's going to be the end of CRM in your area because they can't afford to do contracts anymore and they're going all crazy with it? Let me know. Let me know in the comments, and we'll see you guys next week. Thanks. That's it for another episode of the CRM Archaeology Podcast. Links to some of the items mentioned on the show are in the show notes for this podcast, which can be found at www.archaeologypodcastnetwork.com/CRM Arc Podcast. If you like the show and want to comment, please do. You can leave comments about this or any other episode on the website or on the iTunes page for the episode. You can also email me at chris@archaeologypodcastnetwork.com or use the contact form on the podcast webpage. If you'd like us to answer a question on a future episode, email us. Use the contact form on the website or tweet your questions with the hashtag CRMArcPodcast, or you can tag @ArcPodNet in your tweet. Please share the link to the show wherever you saw it. If you share CRM archaeology related items on Twitter or Facebook or anywhere else for that matter, be sure to use the hashtag CRMArc so the community can see and comment. If you'd like to subscribe to this podcast, you can do so on iTunes or on Stitcher Radio. You can also type the name of the podcast into your favorite podcasting app and subscribe that way. Don't forget to go over to iTunes and leave a review of the show. It helps us get noticed so more people can find our podcast and benefit from the content. Also, send us show suggestions and interview suggestions. We want this to be a resource for field technicians everywhere, and we want to know what you want to know about. Also, please consider donating to the Archaeology Podcast Network. Your donations help fund our bandwidth and contribute to our editing costs. Thanks to everyone for joining me this week. Thanks also to the listeners for tuning in, and we'll see you in the field. Goodbye.
Adios.
Goodbye.
Wow. This show is produced by Chris Webster and Tristan Boyle, and was edited by Chris Webster.
This has been a presentation of the Archaeology Podcast Network. Visit us on the web for show notes and other podcasts at www.archaeologypodcastnetwork.com. Contact us at chris@archaeologypodcastnetwork.com.
Thanks again for listening to this episode and for supporting the Archaeology Podcast Network. If you want these shows to keep going, consider becoming a member for just $7.99 a month. That's cheaper than a venti quad eggnog latte. Go to arcpodnet.com/members for more info.